There's a certain nostalgia in playing PS1 style games. Whether it's the atmosphere that it builds around the player which makes them nostalgic, or it's just the way it looks and just the way it creeps out players with its unsettling looking graphics. Nowadays, making a PS1 game has become a huge hobby in the indie game dev community. And there are like tons and thousands of developers who have made a PS1 style game. The base of it is basically having a lower resolution game that is being upscaled to your monitor, a certain type of shader that simulates the PS1 jittering and the PS1 texture mapping, fine texture mapping, and other things, and also building up around a atmosphere that represents the PS1 style nostalgia from back in the days. Even though PS1 style games are really popular, one of the specific type of genre really uses the most of these type of um, nostalgic graphics, and that being is the horror game genre. In the horror genre, PS1 style graphics is a very unique art style, and it looks honestly really good combined with a certain type of genre, because the way the PS1 represents the graphics, the unsettling vibes of it, the fog, the texture, the tiny details, the small world that it builds around the player, just fits perfectly with a certain type of horror genre. And that is exactly why when you're looking at PS1 style games, you would mostly find horror games all around the place, and they do look pretty good. Making a horror game that uses a very linear but small storyline. The game is usually not too big, it's very small, but it does convey a very interesting message, and also the way the PS1 style graphics just makes it all bloom together is really good. All over, if executed perfectly, your game would look rather cool. Rather than trying to make a horror game with some kind of actual realistic type of graphics, making a horror game that would look lower resolution and would have lower textures and would look like a PS1 game would definitely give that horror charm to your game. So yeah, I have been wanting to continue the part 2 of the tutorial, but I couldn't, and finally I'm back. So let's start off how to make horror PS style game in Unity part 2. I have made the part 1 before. If you want to check that out, by all means go ahead, and well, let's get started. Okay, but at the very beginning of the video, I would like to mention a few things. The first being the about the first tutorial. So if you have watched the first tutorial, you would realize one thing, that in the first tutorial I used a certain type of rendering engine, or a uh, render pipeline made by this guy who has made this haunted PS1 render pipeline. This is a custom render pipeline made for Unity, and it uses the standard render pipeline of Unity as its base, and then it builds a new render pipeline on top of it, which is being used as its main graphics component, and everything that is happening in the scene is coming from that custom-made render pipeline. So what does this mean? This means that you cannot actually use any of the Unity standard tools when you're using that particular graphics render pipeline of Haunted PS1 one. So if you're using that Haunted PS1 thing, you cannot use any other textures, any other materials from Unity. You cannot use Unity's post-processing. You cannot use anything that is related to the scene or the graphics from Unity. Basically meaning that you're stuck with that particular render pipeline unless you know how to code a certain type of shader for it. All the shader that they have given you, that's all that you have. You cannot actually use anything other than that. And on the other hand, I have previously made another video about how to make a PS1 style horror game, or the atmosphere of it. In this video, I have used a shader, and this is for the universal render pipeline of Unity. So what does this mean? If you're using the Haunted PS1 version, then you cannot actually use anything that's given from Unity. But if you're using the URP version, which I've already made a video of, that one will actually allow you to use all the URP shaders and all the Unity shaders all combined together. Basically, there's a lot more opportunity to be used if you're using the Unity's URP version, which means that you can actually do a lot of other stuff with it as well. On the other hand, if you only use the Haunted PS1 one, you will be stuck with what that there is if you're intelligent enough to code something for that particular render pipeline that it is. Now, this wouldn't be a huge issue, but the thing is that if you're using the Haunted PS1 one, you're actually kind of limited towards the way you can customize the look of your game. Yes, there are a few post-processing options, there are a lot of other options, but when it comes to Unity's URP version, there's a lot more to it, and you can always add a bunch of other stuffs as well. For example, add a new type of shader, you can add a new type of post-processing, you can add a lot of other stuff, and also it is more optimized for using in lower-end platforms. And so in today's video, I'll be talking about some of the pros and cons of using that one and versus the URP one, and I'm gonna be showing you how you can use the URP one better. Because one thing that I found, which is a fatal flaw in the haunted PS1 render pipeline, is that you cannot actually use a textured skybox and fog at the same time. Since Unity handles fog natively, and the haunted PS1 render pipeline has its personal fog because it cannot use the Unity's fog, that's why it cannot blend the fog with a textured skybox. Cube mapped texture that we use as a skybox cannot be used with its personal fog, basically stating that the fog will not affect the skybox if you're using the 100 PS1 one, which is a huge issue that I really don't know how to deal with. But on the other hand, on the URP version, since the Unity fog does work, you can just easily use it, and since the entire thing is just basically a shader that simulates the PS1 look and feel, you can always add other things such as screen pixelation and stuff. So I'm going to be showing you that in today's video, and this is the part 2 of the tutorial, like I said. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, let's start off with something simple: textures. So textures are rather important. A huge, not actually huge, 90% of a PS1 game is basically the textures, the type of textures you use. After getting the textures, you will have to downscale them. That can be done in Unity natively. So let's just look at where we can get textures from. So my go-to website is textures.com. It is a sort of free website. You get 15 credits a day. You can download 15 textures a day, and after that 24 hours you're gonna get another 15 credits. So basically in one day you can download 15 different textures. And you may say that the textures are lower quality, lower resolution, since I'm using the free version, but actually that's what we exactly want. We don't actually want high-end, higher pixel textures. We're just fine if we could do like something around 512 by 512. That's basically fine. So that's what we're going to be going for. So in this website you can just find literally everything, and just go ahead and look for it. You'll find everything that you need is in this website. Just search for image textures, go ahead, enter keywords, just look, and you will find all of the textures you need. And if you're if you think that no, I need more than 15 textures a day, by all means subscribe to the plan and just download a bunch of whole textures. There's also 3D models here as well, but for now I'm just gonna keep it the way it is. Software, it's simple as that. You can just go ahead and simply use these textures just the way you want them. Just to show you, I'm gonna real quick grab something from here. This one looks cool, so I'm just gonna grab this one, and as you can see there's a bunch of, not sure what that is, but yeah, here's this one. I'm gonna be using this one. I need this one. Download this. I'm gonna take this as well. This is a 10 seamless. This is the seamless one, but I'm not sure if I need the seamless one anyway, but I'm just gonna download this one. I'm just gonna grab this one. This is for like a while. Download this, and I'm gonna be needing a sort of plant. So you can see there's already a lot of here. We click on this. There are some which are not masked. You can definitely just slap them onto Photoshop and just use the masked alpha channel to remove and make a transparent one out for yourself. From here to photo textures and search again, and as you can see, there you go. We're presented with a lot of stuff. Shrubs. Instead, you can just go ahead here and search for leaf. Search. No one photo. We're just gonna go ahead and search for photo textures, and it should give us these. You can see here's them. You can download them as 3D models if you would pay, but I'm really don't have that much money anyway. So as you can see, here's some other things. You can also get these, but well, of course I can't get them placed. Just scroll down a little bit, find something that I can use. There we go. This looks fine. You can download this one. As you can see, here's another thing, alpha masked. Search these as well to get like, there you go. This is what I was looking for. So there's a bunch of stuff here. Grab this one as well. just to give you a Kickstarter, I have put a link in the description. It's by Mrs. Yeah, anyway, I can't pronounce that, but this guy has created a particular GitHub page with bunch of links to a bunch of PS1 assets. There's like literally everything, starting from cars to buildings to characters, from trees to even crows and fishes and capybaras and everything. That's it, this thing has everything you might want to use for your first PS1 game. And I honestly, if you just look deep into it, you can actually find some really cool stuff and just to kickstart your game without even having to open a 3D modeling software, because everything that you need is already in here. When it comes to PS1 style modeling, it's not that difficult. Even if you have very limited amount of 3D skills, it shouldn't be an issue because you don't really need high detail model. All you need is basic shapes, some basic idea of how Blender works, and you can just put together a very cool PS1 scene. So for this scenario, I'm going to be just building a very simple PS1 style scene so that I can give you a simple idea of how easy it is. You don't need, like I said, you don't really need any good level modeling skills, or you don't even need to be a 3D artist. Just go ahead, try your best, put something together. The base idea of PS1 models is that it's not perfect. It cannot be perfect. The geometry is kind of jaggy, it's weird, it's very linear and straightforward, and that's basically it. That is how PS1 models were made back in the days, because they didn't have a lot of polygons to work with. So try your best to keep things simple, texture them, and you would see that you really ended up with something that does look kind of cool. Okay, if you're anything like me, then you're probably scared of modeling and texturing the model. So one of the quick and easy ways of texturing is to use project from viewport. This can be done by selecting your model and then going into a particular perspective and then just pressing U and then just selecting project from viewport, the way just I'm doing on the screen right now. This can easily help you project a texture on top of your model without even having to properly UV unwrap or going through all that shit. Try to keep your project simple and straightforward so that you don't have to do a lot of complicated modeling or stuff. Just keep it simple so that it also follows the aesthetic of the low poly model style, and also it's easier for you to easily texture and make things out of it, because you can make a lot of really cool stuff with just simple shapes and textures slapped on top of it. That's the one like really cool thing about PS1 style models. It just works. Okay, now you finally bring the model to Unity and you realize that something is off and some of the objects are not showing up. As a matter of fact, they're actually being seen from a different angle, but if you see them from another angle, they just don't show up. For example, the plants that I made and the tin that I made, it's just not there. When you see it from top, it's there. When you see it from under, it's not there. Now, this happens because of a particular system in the 3D modeling software, which is called backface culling. And unlike Blender, Unity doesn't render both faces at the same time. So to fix this, just open up the 3D model which you're using in the scene. Since mine is a direct Blender file, so I can just double click it to open it up. But if yours is an FBX file, then go into Blender and import the FBX file. So once you have it, what you have to do now is to manually select those objects which are giving you this certain type of issue, and then you're gonna have to either fix their normals, or rather than that, there's another simple and easy trick that I personally use and I have found it very useful against all types of scenarios, is to simply add a modifier. So go ahead and select your model, which is giving the issue for my setup. I'm gonna select the 10, and then I'm simply gonna add in a solidify modifier. And what's this gonna do is gonna make your model thick, and yeah, it's gonna make your model thick. And then you just want to turn it down like this. Wait, oh, it's actually on top. So yeah, focus on the model, and I'm gonna turn it down. So from here, I'm gonna just enter a very small value, for example 0.0001, and that should do the trick. And I'm gonna just save this one, and let me, oh wait, you also have to apply the modifier like this. And once you apply it, and now if you go back into Unity after saving it, you should see that the issue has been fixed. Where the model, okay, here we go. So yeah, as you can see, the issue is fixed, and now you can see both faces at the same time. Now this is a very simple fix. There are other ways you can fix the normals if the model is too complicated, but for me, I think this works out perfectly for most of the time, so I really don't want to go into very detailed ways of fixing it, of explaining normal stuff like that. As for a beginner level, this is just perfectly fine. So you just want to have to you're just gonna have to select the models which have this type of issue, and then manually add in these modifiers and enter the value. This might be a little tedious, but to be honest, as a beginner, I find this the simplest way to do it. And this is perfect if you're using too many plane meshes in your scene. So once you do that, just go ahead and save it. And another thing, Unity actually natively supports .blend files. So meaning you don't have to export the file into FBX in order for you to bring it into Unity. You can actually directly import the saved blend file, and Unity will automatically recognize that. So yeah, that's it. This is a very simple way to model out your PS1 stuff. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of the basic stuff, now I'm gonna be giving you some tips for making your next PS1 game. And these are basic stuff, and I guess you should already know it, but if you're a beginner, here's a bit of an idea of where to get started. So first of all, remember that if you're trying to make a game for the first time, try your best to keep the game as small as possible. By small, I mean is to keep the game limited, and don't approach like a huge open world type of thing. Don't go for that, because that is too much for you to just get started. As for the beginning level, I would definitely recommend you trying to create something like a story-based game, which is no longer or no bigger than like 30 minutes or so, or maybe an hour at most. Because if you try to work for like bigger projects, then you would definitely start losing interest, and you would just find that it's getting more and more difficult for you to sort of like cope with everything that you have in your hands, because you would be having so many options and so many possibilities that you would eventually like get overwhelmed by all the things that you can do. And that's a huge issue that most of us indie game developers, or like the beginner ones, face most of the time. We start a project, but we're not able to like finish it because we just get overwhelmed, and we end up going for something else, or just kind of get messed up in between, or just get lost or something like that. So yeah, that's the first tip. Try to keep things small and simple. You don't have to start off with a huge bang. Don't aim for something like that. Just try your best to keep things at a limit, and try your best to work on it. And the second tip that I would like to give you, when it comes to these types of games with low resolution textures, low attention to detail, low polygon character models and everything, attention to detail is a crucial part of it. If you're making a world that's relatively smaller, then you're gonna have to add in a lot of details to it. For example, small grasses, small tiny details such as papers lying on the ground, or other stuff. If you're making a post-apocalyptic type of game or a horror type of game, you can add different variations of trees. You can add a lot of things such as pebbles, rocks, and other things. The basic stuff. You just need to add that attention to detail towards it. All of those small things, because if you don't do that, your game would just feel sort of empty. And since you're making it relatively small, try your best not to make your game world feel empty, and that's a very crucial part of making a game like this. Okay, so the third and the final tip that I would be giving you is that try to keep your game between a certain color scheme. By that I mean is that if you're making a game that looks, for example, the one that I currently have on my screen right now, it's a project that I've been working on for a few days. So in this project, I've kept the color scheme to sort of like a dark type of tone, and everything is black, sort of like black and white. It's not actually black and white. It's actually the color is toned down so much that it just kind of feels like that. Everything is kind of dark and set up between a certain aesthetic. So try your best to keep in between these particular lines. Set up a color scheme, and which one you feel suits your game the most, try to keep it between that. Don't go overboard, or don't suddenly don't change them, or suddenly don't pick up a random item and just put onto that just does not feel, or doesn't look like it belongs there. Don't do that. Try to keep things between a certain color scheme, and it would really make your game pop. And in terms of making a PS1 style game, I would definitely go for something like the one that I've shown in my previous video, or the one that you're seeing on the screen right now. Overall, everything just depends. Use your imagination. Try to get a certain color scheme correct. If you're inspired by some other game, that's also fine. Try your best to replicate that, and combine this with the attention to detail and the linear story and everything all together, and the small world with a lot of details, stuff like that. Then you would have the recipe to make a very good PS1 style horror game. Okay, so by now the video has actually become way too long. So I was thinking I would show you guys the basics of using, like, the difference between the URP version and the haunted PS1 render pipeline version. But honestly, I think it's the video is getting way too big. So I'm definitely gonna have to make another part. So yeah, thanks for watching, and on the next part we're gonna be talking about color precision and how the lighting works in PS1, and how it's different from the version you'd get with URP and the version you'd get with the haunted PS1 version, and how to create a decent enough environment and other things and so on. So this tutorial ends today here. So thanks for watching if you made it this far. I would love to share more, but the video has gotten already way too long. So yeah, thanks for watching. That's all.